Welcome to Inspirational Journeys, everyone. My name is Ann Harrison, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Scott DeLuzio, and I hope I pronounced that right, author and podcast host. Thank you. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to come on your show and share my journey with you and your audience.
Yeah, I really love that. So why don't you start by introducing yourself to the audience?
Yeah, sure. So again, my name's Scott DeLuzio. I am an Army veteran. I served about 6 years in the Connecticut Army National Guard. I served as an infantryman. We deployed to Afghanistan in 2010. And that's where a lot of my story now comes from. The book that I wrote, Surviving Son, is about that deployment to Afghanistan. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that book in a little bit.
We will.
And I also am the host of the Drive On podcast, which focuses on military veterans and the issues that they face after coming back from combat, or just the different things that they face throughout their service. And so, ultimately, this experience that I went through serving in the military has led me to just really wanting to give back and serve the community that I had served in and was a part of for so many years. And now I'm out here just trying to raise awareness for the issues that a lot of the veterans are going through, and helping them find the help and the resources that they need.
Okay, so the question I normally ask my authors is, what inspired you to become a writer? Or was this a one and done?
Yeah, so this was something that I did not really have on my radar. It was not something growing up that I ever thought I'd be an author or anything like that. But the experiences that I had serving overseas in Afghanistan were somewhat unique in some respects. And I also wanted to let people know about some of the sacrifices that the service members make when one or more of them don't make it home, or the injuries, or just the time away from families and things like that. And so, and I know there's other books that have been written about certain things like that, but this was a story that was near and dear to my heart. And I thought it was very important to get this message out there in a way that will outlive me and continue to be able to be read for years and years to come.
Oh, okay. So what inspired you to start your podcast?
So my podcast started actually after getting back home from Afghanistan. Several soldiers that I served with over there came home, and they took their own lives, unfortunately, to suicide due to the post-traumatic stress that they were dealing with, or other issues that they were going through. And obviously, one is too many in that case. But when you start having more and more of your friends and the people that you served with start losing their lives that way, I just thought to myself, I don't feel right just sitting around waiting for that next phone call, waiting for somebody else to make that decision to take their own lives. And when there's so many resources and things out there. And I knew personally what it was like to come back and struggle. I had post-traumatic stress that I was dealing with when I first came home, and grief, and other issues that I was dealing with too. And all of those issues, while they didn't 100% just magically disappear and go away, they all got better when I decided to take some sort of action and get some help. And so I decided that I could reach not just the people that I served with, the people who I knew, but there were so many people throughout the entire veteran community who were experiencing very similar situations, and they all need to hear these messages that there is hope out there, that you don't have to call it quits, that you can keep pushing through and keep fighting for another day, and just finding the help that you need, so it's not a struggle anymore. It becomes a much better, happier, healthier way of life. And so I decided to start the podcast to really reach these people as many people as I could. And I figured a podcast is a great way to do it. It's free for the listeners to listen to. They can download it and listen to it whenever they want, in the privacy of their own homes or in their cars on the way to work, and even for their loved ones, the people who are caring for them when they're dealing with a lot of these things. They may feel like they're stuck too. They don't know where to turn or what to do. So being able to listen to some of these inspirational messages that we have on the podcast, or even just finding out about resources that you may not have known existed, it could just be that light bulb moment where you're like, oh wow, I didn't realize this existed. This would be perfect for me or that loved one that I'm caring for who's dealing with these issues. So really ultimately the goal was to help out and reduce the number of people who are struggling on their own and suffering with all of these issues that a lot of the veterans are going through.
Wow. So tell me a little bit about your book. Let's segue into that.
Yeah, sure. So my book, again, the book is called Surviving Son, and the story is, it starts off with my upbringing. My brother and I, he was my younger brother, Stephen. Our upbringing in our middle class childhood, we grew up in a very patriotic family. We learned to respect the military and first responders, and basically the people who put on the uniform and risk their lives for people who they don't even know. They go out there day after day, and we were just brought up to respect those people, and we sort of looked up to them as almost like superheroes, the way a kid would look up to like a Superman or a sports star like a Michael Jordan or something like that, and so that was our upbringing. And so I thought that was important because later on in the story, I talk about how after 9/11 had occurred, my brother and I were older at that point, obviously, and now um, we were faced with the decision: what are we going to do with our lives? Are we going to join the military that we were brought up to respect and everything like that, or are we going to just continue on with everything? My brother was still in high school at the time, so the military wasn't exactly an option for him at that point. I was in college, and I decided for me, I was going to finish out college and just continue on with college. My brother, when he got to college and he got out of high school and everything, he eventually decided to join the Army National Guard up near where he was going to school in Vermont. And all of a sudden, my younger brother became this this person that I had grown up like looking up to and almost idolizing. And he went from the little kid that we would fight in the backyard or get into trouble with and all that kind of stuff, to now I'm looking up to him like, oh my gosh, I totally respect him, and I'm super proud of everything that he was doing. And so that eventually became sort of the spark that led me to joining the military as well. So I talk about all that stuff, our upbringing and how we got involved in the military. But really where the story kind of gets into the big details is when we were deployed to Afghanistan. So he and I were both deployed to Afghanistan at the same time. And for a lot of the listeners, they may think that that's just not something that the military does, but that's not true. I've heard that from a lot of people. They're very surprised that the military would send brothers overseas to the same combat zone at the same time. It seemed like from the Saving Private Ryan movie, a lot of people just think that that's just not something that people do anymore, that the military does anymore, and that's not true. They definitely do. And so we were both over there, and that was a very difficult time for our families, having both sons to be deployed and everything like that, especially to a combat zone. We were both infantrymen, so we were, doing the frontline fighting overseas in Afghanistan there. So our parents and our families knew that it was a dangerous situation, and it may not work out very well for us. So when we were over there, it was hard for them. And so we talk about that in the book. But on that deployment, my younger brother, Stephen, he was out on a mission on a patrol, and his unit got ambushed, and he was hit in that ambush, and he was killed in action. And
Ooh.
so that's where the title of the book, Surviving Son, comes in, because there's an Army regulation called Surviving Sons and Daughters, and that basically discusses how a person like myself who survived, and there was my brother, the other son in the family, if you will, he was killed in action, and so it discusses how someone like myself can be discharged out of the military for that purpose. So that's where the name of the book comes from, is from that Army regulation. And so the rest of the book goes on to talk about how I dealt with the loss of my brother. About 20 minutes after finding out about my brother being killed, I found myself in a firefight with the people who were in the village that we had just come out of. I was also out on a mission that day. And so how I dealt with that, how I dealt with the grief and the loss, and everything that went around with that. And then dealing with the PTSD after I got home, and dealing with the stresses of returning back to civilian life, and not integrating very well back into my civilian job that I had, and dealing with things at home that were new to me. I was a new father. My oldest son was born just about a month and a half before I was deployed to Afghanistan. So I didn't really know how to be a father. I was trying to figure that out while I was dealing with all this other stuff too. And for me, it was just like a perfect storm of all these bad situations going on all at the same time, and it was just really difficult for me to deal with. And so I was dealing with them in very unhealthy ways. I was drinking too much. I wasn't sleeping hardly at all. I was just getting angrier and angrier at the world, at people. And ultimately, I discovered that I needed to get help. And this was back in a time when mental health and going to speak to a counselor was still very much stigmatized, and people didn't want to talk about things like that. And you were looked at as being weak, and everything. And so it took me much longer than it should have to go and finally get some help. But part of the reason why I wanted to write this book was so that there's other people out there who are in similar situations to what I was in, and they should know that it's okay to go and talk to somebody and get the help that they need, because you could end up just completely ruining your life by not going and talking to people and getting that assistance, and it's just not worth it. And so that's really kind of the gist of the book, and where the message is coming in for the readers.
So, and I'm curious, did you have not only the PTSD from being over, in that all that action over there, but did you have survivor's guilt after your brother
Yeah,
passed?
for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I thought to myself, especially being the older brother, just in most families, that the older brother is the protector. It's the guy who will, look out for the younger brother for, bullies on the playground, or things like that. And it just ate me up inside when I thought to myself that I should have been there for him. I should have, instead of joining the unit that I joined, I should have joined the unit he was in, so that I could have been there with him. Whether I actually would have been there or not was irrelevant in my thinking. It was that I should have done more to try to protect him. And so when I came home, I kept asking myself, like, why is he gone and I'm not? I should be the one who was gone. I should be the one who took the bullet instead of him. I should have done that, because that's sort of my job as the older brother. I should have been there for him, and I should have done more for him. And yeah, survivor's guilt was a really big thing with me in this whole journey.
Wow. So, do you find that writing the book was cathartic for you?
Yes and no. Some parts of it, revisiting it, were almost torture for me, to go back and relive some of those experiences in my mind. Um, it was hard to do in some cases, but but I found that after I wrote down some of these situations, like finding out when my brother was killed, when I got that notification, the firefight that I was in shortly thereafter, all of those things. After I wrote about those things, to me, it sort of felt like this is it. It's final. It's over. I can put this to bed, and I don't have to relive this anymore. It's out there now, and I don't have to continue reliving these experiences. So in a way, it helped, and it wasn't totally true because I still do have thoughts and memories of these experiences. But at the time, it felt like I was kind of closing the book and saying, "This is it. I can put this on the shelf, and I don't have to relive these things if I don't want to now." So in a way, at first it was almost like a torture trying to relive those experiences, but then it felt good to, when I finally got it out on the page, to be like, okay, this is my story. This is out there now, and I don't have to retell it if I don't want to, you know.
Wow. So let's talk about your process. Did you outline the book, or did you just write, sit down and start writing?
Yeah. So when I first got back from Afghanistan, I wanted to write down just notes about things that had happened, not in any particular format or order. I wasn't even planning on writing a book at that point. It was really just so that there were certain things that had taken place that I didn't want to forget. And I knew our memories over time, they fade, or they play tricks on us, and we remember things in a way that didn't actually happen sometimes. And our memories just aren't as sharp the further time goes on. So I wrote down all the things that I could think of, and I just put it all out there on just some notes. And I knew eventually my kids would probably have questions about what I did in the war, and things like that. And I wanted to have something I could go refer back to if I felt like my memory was fuzzy and stuff like that. So at first, there was no process. There was nothing other than just me jotting down notes, and just putting in whatever I could think of, whether it was places that I was at, feelings I was having, things that I did, whatever. I just put them all in this notebook. And then around the time that I started my podcast, about a little over 3 years ago now, I remembered all these notes that I had taken, and everything that I had done before. And I thought that the story that I lived through might be of use to some other people. It might be beneficial for somebody else who is grieving a loss the way similar to what I had, or who had been in combat. They might want to hear this type of story. And sometimes I've learned along the way, sometimes just hearing someone else's story, hearing that they had a um, uh, particular struggle, and this is their process for getting through, that could just be the spark for somebody else to say, there is hope for me. If this guy did it, then maybe I can do it too. And so I wanted to put that story out there, not only just to be cathartic for me to write the story, but to help other people. And even if one person read the book and it helped them, then I chalk that up to a success. Fortunately, a lot more people have read the book, so hopefully a lot of those people have gotten some benefit from that. But that to me was the biggest thing, was just being able to get it out there. And as far as the process went, I went through several revisions on the book, and I started it off in different ways, but I blocked each chapter off in a certain way that they almost could be just moved around interchangeably, and the story would flow no matter what. And so initially I had the book starting with the day that my brother was killed and how I found out and everything like that, and then going into the rest of the whole journey of dealing with that loss and how we got to where we were, and everything like that. And that timeline just didn't seem to flow very well. It seemed like you're hitting the reader with the
the hard stuff first.
Big hard stuff first, and then everything else is just kind of like all downhill after that. And not that that stuff wasn't important, it was an important part of the story, but it's almost like you need to build up to something. And so instead I decided to do things chronologically. So I started off with our kind of our childhood and our upbringing, and how we got into the military, then how we got to Afghanistan,
And then lower the boom.
and then bring things back down so that the reader didn't end on that high intensity, you know.
Yeah, I don't mean to make it sound as the way it did, but when I said lower the boom, put the action and the full, you know, what the full blow, what happened.
Yep.
Again, I hope that didn't sound, you know, too harsh when I said that.
No, not at all, not at all. And I think that is exactly what the thought process was to kind of lower it, you know, as things went on, and kind of have almost like a bell curve where you start off kind of low, you work your way up, like almost a roller coaster. You work your way up, and then you come down, and you can end the ride not screaming your head off, you know.
Yeah. So, what takeaways do you want our audience to walk away with, or what takeaways do you want readers to walk away with?
Yeah. So as far as I guess just the general audience who might be listening to this, one of the things for me, when I started this journey of writing the book, I thought back to myself when I was in high school, sitting in high school English class, and thinking about just how terrible of an English student I was. Like, if any of my English teachers found out that I have written a book, they may have a heart attack right on the spot, because it would have been such a surprise to them. But when you have a story in you that you're passionate about, that you feel is so important that the world needs to see, or a certain segment, you know, it could just be a specific niche of the population that needs to hear the story or read the book or whatever, just start writing and put something out there. You'll surprise yourself with how well you can tell the story, especially if you're passionate about it, and just put it out there. The barrier to entry for writing a book these days is so low, compared to what it was years and years ago, when you know, you needed the printing company and everything like that to get on board and print the books and everything. You don't need all of that stuff anymore. It's so easy to write a book. Just get out there and put something out there. Put your story out there, because your story is important to somebody. And so, yeah, get that story out there. And as far as the readers go, you know, I want the veterans who read the book to know that they can learn from my mistakes, that there's healthy ways to deal with the issues that they might be going through, and take my situation as an example of that. I totally did things the wrong way. I was doing things in a very unhealthy, self-destructive kind of way, and it didn't lead to anything good. But once when I started getting help and going in the right direction, things started to get better. It was a process. It was a slow process. And as a matter of fact, for full transparency, I'm still going through that process. It's not a like a light switch that you just flip the switch and boom, everything's bright again. You might have to go through this process, and it might take several iterations to go through whatever the situation is that you might be dealing with. But just know that there are healthier ways to deal with things than what you might be doing if you're self-medicating or things like that. There are totally better ways to do that. And as far as the civilians, the people who've never served in the military, I hope that they learn about the sacrifices that we make in the military and how it affects our families and the communities that we leave behind. And I hope this, not to say that I'm an anti-war kind of person, because I'm definitely not. I see the purpose and the need for war in certain circumstances, but before we as a country rush into another war in another foreign land somewhere, another Vietnam or Afghanistan or Iraq or whatever, we should really take a look at the benefit to whatever it is that we're getting ourselves into. Because if we can say, yes, it's worth the lives of people like my brother, then okay, then maybe we do need to look at going into this situation. But if we look at it and say, that family really doesn't need to lose that loved one over this, whatever this conflict is, then maybe we should rethink it and try to come up with a different approach for whatever it is that we're getting ourselves into. And not to try not to get political with any of that messaging there, but really, I think if we take these stories of families like ours who it has impacted personally and internalize that, so it's not just a random person, a random name or face on the news that they're talking about the soldier who was killed, and then you forget about it 10 minutes later. It might stick a little bit more, and it might make it so that people will think twice about sending our young men and women overseas to fight a war that maybe doesn't need to be fought.
Right. And I like that fact that you are letting the people who have suffered, have gone to the military and are suffering with these, the PTSD and all of that, you're letting them know that they're not alone. And and to me, that's important. So did you self-publish the book, or did you have it, or did you?
I self-published the book, and I did that for a few reasons. I could have gone the traditional publishing route. However, when I released the book, this was last August that I released the book, and I went through Amazon, the self-publishing route through there. It was right around the time that the withdrawal from Afghanistan was taking place. And if anyone remembers back to last August, there was a lot of things that went wrong with that. The Taliban took over really quickly, much faster than most people anticipated. And it hurt a lot of the people who had served over there, who lost friends or other loved ones who served over there. And it started making people think, was this war all for nothing? What was even the purpose of us going over there and fighting if basically overnight all the good that we did has just been washed away? And so I was just about ready to start approaching publishers at that point, when at the beginning of August, and I decided I don't really want to wait for a publisher to review the book and then pick it up and then wait 6 months to a year for them to decide to publish it and get it out there, because people need to read this book now. And so I decided to just self-publish it and get the book out there, so that the people who were dealing with this anger and this grief from the way we pulled out of Afghanistan could have something that they could read and hopefully help them with what they were going through.
Right, because stories matter so much. And that's what I tell the listeners all the time. Remember, your story matters, because it does. You got a message to share, no matter what type of, I mean, I know it's not, yours was a memoir, but no matter what type of genre you write, you've got a story that somebody needs to hear.
Right.
So, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so for the book, again, the name of the book is Surviving Son. You can get that on Amazon. Like I said, it's available in any format that you would possibly want to consume it in. There's the Kindle ebook, there's paperback, hardcover, and also recently I released the audiobook as well. So whatever format that you prefer, you can get all of that on Amazon. I think the audiobook is also on iTunes as well. You can get links to all of that on my website, survivingsonbook.com. And that is where you can also get a signed copy of the book if you would like to have a signed copy of it. And then for the podcast, you can go to driveonpodcast.com and you can check out episodes there, or you can find all the links to subscribe on wherever you listen to podcasts or social media. All that kind of stuff is all on the driveonpodcast.com.
Okay, so now the final question. I was inspired by another podcaster to ask this. What is your call to action? What do you have a challenge for the listeners and the viewers today? a resource that you want to lead them to, what is your call to action?
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing is just making sure that people know that they're not alone and to not give up on whatever it is that they're dealing with in their lives. Um, there's so many people who they're dealing with things like PTSD or any number of other things, and they just isolate, they withdraw themselves from their normal group of friends or their family or their neighbors or coworkers, and they just separate themselves from all these people, and it makes them feel like they're just all alone in this world and that there's nothing out there for them. um, you're not alone. There's plenty of people out there who want to help you. uh, get out there and find those people. Find the group of people that give you a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, a sense of direction in your life. And it may or may not be family. Some people don't have a great family life, a great relationship with those people, but especially for the veterans, find a place like the American Legion or the VFW, where you can find other like-minded veterans who you can associate with, and that will help to kind of pull you back into society and stop isolating yourself. So get out there and do something with the gift that you've been given, which is another day waking up and taking a breath of fresh air. Definitely do something with that.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for your service in the military.
Thank you.
And second of all, I want to thank you for being on the show, because your story, the story of your journey through that process of losing your brother and surviving and overcoming the grief, the PTSD, the overcoming the loss, is an incredible one. And we challenge you today to go out there and read to get inspired, write something inspiring, and share your creation with the world. For when you've touched one life, you've touched thousands. Thanks for joining us on Inspirational Journeys today. And remember, as I've said it, I've said it before, and I will say it 1,000 times over, your story matters, because you have a message that God has given you, a message that only you can share, that somebody needs to hear today. Thanks for joining us again, and have a blessed day.